If you've had enough of Universes Beyond and all associated cash grabs and price gouging, we're escaping to the one place that hasn't been corrupted by capitalism. Space!
Good evening, Draftaholics, and welcome to Draft Punks. This is your pre-release and draft guide for Edge of Eternities.
That's no moon.
It's a spacecraft with station. Spacecraft are a new artifact subtype that ask your many space folk to man the station to turn them into creatures. Each spacecraft has station, which says tap another creature you control, put charge counters equal to its power on this spacecraft. Station only as a sorcerer. Each spacecraft then has a certain threshold at which point it becomes a creature with an indicated power and toughness and other abilities.
For example, at 3 charge counters or higher, Wormwall Sweeper becomes a 2/2 artifact creature with flying. Galvanizing Sourship is more expensive to cast but becomes a 6/5 flying haste at 3+.
Many of the spacecraft give you some sort of benefit before they're being turned on, so you're not just spending mana on some Darksteel relics with nice art. Specimen Freighter gives you a nice double bounce effect for 6 mana, which is pretty similar to past cards like Calamitous Tide or Floodwaters. Then it becomes a 4/7 flying mill machine at station level 9 or higher. These value spacecraft are found in every colour.
Some higher rarity spacecraft have 2 station thresholds, where the first grants an additional ability, but only the second turns it into a creature. For example, Lumen class frigate turns into an anthem for your team at 2+, but is still just a regular artifact. Then it becomes a creature at 12+.
Finally, there's also a mythic cycle of planets, which are lands with station. These turn into powerful callback lands at level 12+, resembling fan favourites like Tolarian Academy or Gaia's Cradle. These won't matter too much for Limited, but they will be exciting to see at your pre-release.
Warp is an alternate cost that represents the faster-than-light travel essential for all good sci-fi. When you pay by warp, you get a mana discount but have to exile the creature at end of turn. You can then cast it from exile on a later turn for its full cost.
Warp has benefits that come in many different forms. Some have enters the battlefield effects that you can trigger on the cheap via warp, like the Surveil 2 on Starbreach Whale, or a +1/+1 counter from Rayblade Trooper. Some have a static effect that you can enjoy for a turn via warp, then permanently when you play them for full cost, like Memorial Team Leader or U Social Engineering.
But then there's the really cool stuff like All Fate Stalker, which exiles a creature until the Stalker leaves the battlefield. So on the warp side, you can flicker your own creature, and on the full side, exile one of their creatures Banisher Priest style.
Note that warp does not inherently give a creature haste. So although Bygone Colossus is a 9/9 you can drop in for 3 mana, it can't actually attack that turn, so it's up to you to find a way to actually do anything with it. Also, you can only warp a card from your hand, so after you've put it into exile, you can only then cast it for its normal cost. You can't warp it again.
Void is an ability word that improves the effects of certain cards if a non-land permanent left the battlefield this turn, or if a card was warped. All of you Fatal Push enjoyers will see the similarities with Revolt, but you don't get to cheat this time using fetch lands.
Void effects are found on instants and sorceries, such as removal like Plasma Bolt, or a card draw like Decode Transmissions, but also on artifacts like Hilderblade, or creatures like Insatiable Skidamore.
Getting permanents to die when you want them to is often much harder than you might think, so you will really want to keep an eye out for ways to make that happen. Unlike Revolt, Void looks at all players' battlefields, so removing your opponent's creatures will do the trick, whether in combat or otherwise, as will your own sacrifice effects.
The other way to ensure you'll always have Void turned on is just load up on warp creatures, which gives you a bunch of good value anyway. Void is turned on as soon as you cast a card for its warp cost. It doesn't need to have been exiled yet, and in fact, it doesn't even need to resolve, so get stuffed, dirty control players.
Lander tokens are a new type of artifact token that you sacrifice for 2 mana to go get a basic land from your deck into play tapped. They're like little rampant growths just waiting to be cracked.
As always with these artifact tokens, there's much more to them than meets the eye. On the surface, yes, you can use these to make sure you hit all your land drops in a longer game, and you can bet your bottom Republic credit that we'll be using them to fix our mana in crazy multicolour piles.
But it gets better. There is a strong landfall theme in Edge of Eternities, particularly in red-green, so you can save your lander tokens to ensure you can continually trigger your landfall creatures, even at instant speed.
You can also sacrifice the landers to Embrace Oblivion or Umbral Collar's Zealot, and have them count towards your Lightless Evangel. Or you can just leave them hanging around to power up your Lux Knight Breacher or your Monoist Circuit Feeder. Blue-White is apparently supposed to be a double spell deck, headlined by Signpost Uncommon Station Monitor, along with friends like Ilvoy Operative and Gigastorm Titan. However, it actually looks like Blue-White will play a nice tempo game, with plenty of bounce spells like Desculpting Blast or Specimen Freighter, tap effects like Mechanizoa or Starport Security, and any number of cheap creatures like Sunstar Expansionist or Ilvoy Galeblade.
Station Monitor also points to an artifact-based control deck with plenty of cheap removal like Reroute Systems or Seam Rip, card draw artifacts like Mechan Navigator or Sam's new favourite card, Cryogen Relic. Combine these with payoffs like Mechan Assembler or Cerebral Download, and you'll be causing complaint posts on Reddit in no time.
Blue-Black is also playing in the artifact space, and again looks to have plenty of different builds possible. It could also lean into an aggressive or tempo game with starts like Ilvoy Galeblade into Hilda Blade. It also has sacrifice effects like Embrace Oblivion and Umbral Collar's Zealot, to pair with value artifacts like Cryogen Relic or Virus Beetle, to help turn on your Void cards like Tragic Trajectory or Hymn of the Faller.
Blue-Black plays with artifacts in lots of different ways, so make sure you are conscious of which your deck wants to be doing. For example, Cloud Sculpt Technician, Gravblade Heavy, and Monoist Circuit Feeder want you to have artifacts in play, while Comet Crawler, Selfcraft Mechan, and the other sacrifice cards mentioned earlier want you to get rid of your artifacts. In either case, you'll want cards like Steel Swarm Operator and Mechan Assembler, but just be careful your deck isn't getting its wires crossed.
Let go your earthly terror, enter the void, empty, and become wind. Black Red is back to its sacrificing ways again, and we're getting big March of the Machine sack deck vibes from Edge of Eternities. We've got Aki Scrap Chomper back in the form of Slag Drill Scrapper, to be paired with actual factual Virus Beetle once again. Everything in this deck looks cheap, 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 so if you can keep the cards flowing with Hymn of the Faller and Melded Moxite, you will just bury your opponent with cards and cheap threats.
For your threats, keep an eye out for Coveron Harrier to keep spitting out expendable sack fodder, and Lightless Evangel to grow off all that sacrificing. Polish your deck off with some synergistic removal like Dubious Delicacy and Tragic Trajectory. You should have one lean, mean, capitalistic machine.
Red-Green is an aggressive landfall deck, headlined by Remnant Elemental, Ice Cave Crasher, and Tanakh Memorial Ensign. The land tokens really touch down here, with the prospect of triggering these effects multiple times per turn being quite real, as is the threat of being able to trigger them in the middle of combat, or sometimes just the threat will be good enough.
So keep an eye out for good synergistic pieces for the deck. Edge Rover is apparently a 1-mana 2/2 reach artifact creature with the downside of giving you a lander token to go with your landfall dudes. On the other end of the curve, Harmonious Grove Strider will be the most heckin' Chonkosaurus in any deck looking to make land drops as regularly as possible. Don't get me started on what happens when you use that pull through the weft to bring it back.
Green-White is the home for galaxy brains like Adrian, who enjoy stacking so many dice on their cards that they can't see the Therese Nielsen art anymore. Dockworker Drone looks like the Star Pupil or Enduring Bond Warden that we've seen before, but Broodguard Elite is on another level entirely, triggering regardless of how it leaves the battlefield and scaling with the size of the game. There's also some seriously strong +1/+1 counter adding tricks in the format, including Biosynthetic Burst, which has just every keyword in Magic on it, and Honor, which is 1 mana and draws a card.
And there are plenty of good synergies with +1/+1 counters worth going for. Honor is nice, but why not just add Double Strike as well with Dual Sun technique? Starport Security is basically unplayable if you need 4 mana per tap, but the counters deck is more than happy to pay just 2. Rayblade Trooper gives you a Constellation Human whenever your giant robot dies, and Scout for Survivors will have your opponent weirdly disconnect from Arena after you drop 6 power worth of creatures into play from the bin.
White-Green might be thick, but White-Black is going the other way and creating more tokens than Vessel's abs. So, drop your Knight Luminary in on turn 2 and turn 4 for some free 1/1 soldiers, throw an Honoured Knight Captain in for a few more, then use Exosuit Savior to pick them all up for another go-round.
What are we to do with our token army? Well, there's the Sacrifice and Void suite we've talked about already, but you Honourable Space Knights probably have nobler intentions. We've got our classic Trumpet Blast effect in Zealous display, or some repeatable mass pump in the form of gold uncommon Servondam, or dual sun adepts. The creative among us can also take advantage of all your expendable Space Marines via Convoke on Vote Out, or by making a chunky Lux Knight Breacher.
Black-green are the salvagers of the cosmos, looking for bits of spacecraft or person they can resurrect. Now, this is not your spider spawning style graveyard deck, where you want as many dead bugs as possible. You'll mostly be looking to salvage just the very best from the junkyard. Seed Ship Broodtender and Fell Gravship, for example, both give you some mills and then your choice of the scrap back to your hand.
This will of course play into the other themes in black and green. You can have a Sacrifice and Void theme and continually recur your good value creatures with Scrounge for Eternity or Pull Through the Weft. I don't know about you, but casting Faller's Faithful to draw 2 cards or kill a creature, then sacrificing it to Swarm Color to draw a card, then picking it up for another go around, sounds exactly like the sort of value I'd get launched into a black hole for.
The deepest reaches of space are home to the strangest monsters, but you're going to have to work to get that far out. Get started early with a Gene Pollinator and Sammy's Curiosity, and as many other landers as you can get your handers on. Once you've ramped to the deepest fathoms of space, you'll start to find the Glacier Godmore and Mouth of the Storm are ready to greet you.
Part of what's cool about this ramp deck is that a lot of the fatties have warp, such as Germinating Worm and Mechanozoa. So if your hand is a little slow, you will still be able to use your cards in the early game without losing out on your top end. Also, keep an eye out for sweet build around Fungal Colossus, who will reward you handsomely for building irresponsible multicolor piles or picking up some nice new shocklands.
Memenon Uthros Exile is the signpost uncommon for blue-red, which is also hanging out in the artifact space, with a greater focus on artifacts entering the battlefield. Oreplate Pangolin and Weftstalker Ardent will give you some good early starts to pressure the opponent's life total every time you play an artifact, while your Cloud Sculpt Technician can keep chipping in the air, as long as you don't lose all those artifacts somehow.
You'll really want to look for cards that can create multiple artifacts, either at once or repeatedly, to really make this deck hum. Cover on Harrier seems critical here to potentially get an artifact trigger every turn. Likewise, Melded Moxite can help you dig while also providing 2 different artifacts, and any artifact creature with warp like Red Tiger Mechan can give you multiple triggers in one card.
Red-white is the Spacecraft archetype, with most of the payoffs coming for having tapped creatures. Now, it can feel pretty bad if you have to tap your creatures just to partially station a spacecraft, or just have that spacecraft removed. So Sammy Ship's Engineer will just spot you a free 2/2 artifact creature token if you use 2 or more of your creatures to either attack or station. Likewise, your Flight Deck Coordinator will gift you some life to help keep you alive till launch, and Dawnstrike Vanguard will buff up the whole station squad.
So you'll probably want some Spacecraft to go in your Spacecraft deck, huh? You'll want to be pretty careful here. Much like with vehicles, too many Spacecraft versus creatures can be pretty awkward. So you'll want to pick up a few really good ones. Of course, any rare or mythic spacecraft like Lumen-class frigate, the Sarima, or Warmaker gunship will easily make the cut. But even at uncommon, red-white has some of the best in the set, including Wedgelight Rammer, which spots you a creature to start stationing it, Debris Field Crusher, which can chicken nug something annoying of your opponents, and Rescue Skiff, which can reanimate Omnisia, your best creature or enchantment in the graveyard.
Color fixing in Edge of Eternities is a bit of a vacuum, which is going to make deck building pretty interesting because there's a lot of overlap between the different 2-colored archetypes. So there's no dual land cycle at all. Command Bridge is the only land we get at common to use across the different archetypes. There's a few scraps to be found in the artifact slot, such as All Fate Scroll and Dauntless Scrapbot, and green gets a few good tools too, including Gene Pollinator, Larval Scoutlander, and a lot of other cards that can make lander tokens.
To be honest, the lander tokens are probably the best source of fixing in the set, and they might just be enough because there are a lot of them across all 5 colors, and they synergize so well with so much of the set. But that will mean you will need basics of all your splash colors, so don't go too overboard with the splashing. Leave that to us.
Edge of Eternities has a bonus sheet called Stellar Sights, which is all cool lands from Magic's history in sick new art. Ancient Tomb, Cascading Cataracts, Lotus Field, and plenty of others. However, these only appear in 1 in every 8 play boosters, so There'll be slightly less than 1 on average in your pre-release kit, and roughly 3 in a full draft pod. They're mostly cards for constructed anyway, so they won't be affecting your limited games all too much.
We will have our first draft video with the new set out the day it drops on Arena, so if you want to come with us to enjoy all the nonsense that is available in Edge of Eternities draft, drop us a subscribe and we'll drop the goodies right onto your timeline on the day of release.